We have reached day 54, so I'm excited. This wine has been sitting for a few weeks now. All of the sediment has fallen out. I'm going to give you a detail of that in just a minute. And then we're going to get to racking the wine. Now there you go. There's a very nice detail of the sediment that's in the bottom of this carboy. Now this is fallen out of the wine over the course of a few weeks with the help of chitosan and quisisol. Now we're going to rack this wine. This is that Stag's Leap Merlot. We're going to rack that off and rack it off of the lees, this sediment that you see at the bottom. We're going to leave as much of that as we can. We're going to get that in a fresh carboy and we're going to let that sit for a day or two before we filter it. We've started the racking process and I'm continually scooting that autosiphon down into the wine. I don't want to stir up any of the sediment that's at the bottom. I do have a few oak cubes that are still floating, but that's not going to matter. Here's a bit of a detail of the autosiphon. I'm going to drop it down just a little bit because it's starting to get to the end. There we go. Again, being very careful, very careful not to mix up any of that sediment. You can see it's doing the job now. It's doing really nicely. It's siphoning out very cleanly. I'm going to scoot that autosiphon down just a little more. You can see we're getting way close to the bottom, and I'm going to keep nudging this along until we're actually there. Watching the tube at the top to make sure that I don't get any sediment. That's, I think, as far down as it's going to go. And it is about to the end, almost. We're at almost the end. What I'm going to do now, because that is actually resting on the bevel bottom, is I'm going to pull the autosiphon out, take the clip off, and I'm going to start the autosiphon again to get that last bit. And don't forget, most of your red wines you're certainly going to let sit for better than 6 months. So measure out a 1/4 teaspoon of metabisulfite, and we're going to add water to this beaker, and then we're going to add the beaker to our wine. That's going to help preserve the wine certainly longer than 6 months. I have red wines that I bottled back in 2013. It's now 2020, and they are still actually drinkable. So I followed the directions. I've added a 1/4 teaspoon of metabisulfite to this wine after I'm done doing this. Now at this point I'm going to take the metabisulfite solution and pour it into the carboy, and then I'll go ahead and mix that in gently. And the notion here is that the metabisulfite will stop any fermentation from continuing, and at this point we are really ready to let this wine settle. So we'll continue with this and we'll go to the next stage. Now you'll notice that there's quite a bit of headroom in that carboy. Well, during the racking process there was quite a bit of juice left over, but it was sort of mixed in with the sediment. So what I did was I poured that into this container and I let it sit overnight in the refrigerator, and what that did was that allowed the sediment to drop to the bottom, and that gave me clear wine that I then went ahead and just filtered through a coffee filter to bring that level just a little higher in the carboy. And that's what I'm doing right now. So you'll see that's clear wine that's coming out. There are a few oak cubes that are sort of descending, and now if you're watching you'll see a little bit of the sediment coming forward, and that's about when I stop pouring this. So we're going to let that finish siphoning, well, filtering into the carboy, and I should have a pretty good amount in there. See, there's the sediment that's left over. We'll show that we're making sure that's well combined. Just a little bit of this. And we'll show putting the top back on and using the wine preserver again just to lay a blanket down on top. And we're going to let this sit for 1 day before we filter. Wow, so that was a lot of work to do for just a racking of a wine. This is an example of where you see that sometimes our tooling isn't exactly perfect. And in this situation, the auto-siphon clamp didn't let the auto-siphon go far enough down into the carboy, and I had about that much wine left over in that carboy. But that was okay, because what I ended up doing was off camera I went ahead and pulled that wine out. I just simply dumped it into a container, and because it had some sediment that had gotten mixed in, no problem, I put the container in the refrigerator overnight, and that's sufficient to let the rest of that sediment drop out. And then I added the clear wine to the carboy, so it brought it up a little higher. But that's a very good example of, wow, what happens if you encounter a mistake during the process? That's okay. There's a way to work around it. So the next edition, in the next video we're going to put together for you in a couple of days, is the filtering of this wine, because I think this wine really is going to do well by being polished nicely through a filter. So we're going to filter that wine and then we'll be bottling it. So I'm going to let that wine settle down after the racking for a day or two, and then I'm going to go ahead and filter the wine. It'll sit for another couple of days, then it'll be bottled. So stick with us. I think it's going to be really exciting.